The hall was silent, except for the sound of metal echoing under heavy boots. Cold blue light spilled from high windows, making the shadows stretch like long fingers across the floor. In the center of the hall, a young alien woman knelt on a ground covered with sharp iron spears, their tips pointing upward like the teeth of some waiting beast. Her skin was pale, her hands shaking, her breathing uneven. The spears pressed into her legs and feet, cutting small lines of red. She was trembling, not because she was weak, but because the pain never stopped. Around her stood a circle of guards, their armor black and glossy, their helmets hiding any sign of a face. Their weapons rested in their hands, ready. Though there was no danger in front of them, they knew she could not run. She could barely move without tearing her skin. And yet they watched her like she was some wild creature that might leap at any moment. Behind the guards, rows of alien citizens filled the gallery seats. Some whispered to each other, others simply stared. A few eyes held pity. But no one spoke for her, no one dared. She had no crime, no trial. No judge who listened to her words. The punishment had been decided before she even knew the charges. The law of this place was not written in books. It was carved into the habits of its people. Old customs ruled here, customs that cared nothing for truth or mercy. Her name was Avelra. She had been taken from the street without warning. One moment she was buying fruit in the market. The next, a heavy hand was on her shoulder. They dragged her through the narrow roads, past the staring crowds, into the heart of the council hall. They told her nothing. They only ordered her to kneel. The spears were cold at first, almost bearable. But soon the sharp tips began to burn into her skin. Her muscles ached from holding herself still. Each breath sent a new wave of pain through her body. Avelra looked up once at the high throne at the far end of the hall. The council leader sat there, draped in layers of red cloth and gold chains. His eyes were empty, his voice like stone when he spoke. "She will remain until the sun sets," he said. No explanation, no reason. She tried to remember if she had spoken out of turn, if she had touched something forbidden. But there was nothing. She was innocent. And that truth was heavier than the pain, because it meant there was no way to bargain. No promise she could make to earn her freedom. The crowd shifted, a murmur passing through them. Avelra lowered her eyes, too tired to wonder why. Then she heard its slow footsteps at the back of the hall. Not the heavy march of a guard, not the soft glide of a council servant. These steps were different, measured, calm. But each one loud enough to be heard in the silence. The guards turned their heads, their grips tightening on their weapons. From the shadowed doorway, a figure walked into the light, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket that had seen better days. His boots were scuffed, his eyes sharp. He looked at the hall like he owned it, though he clearly did not belong here. The air seemed to shift. The citizens whispered among themselves. Some voices carried words in a low hiss. Human. The word was not spoken with welcome. It was spoken like a warning. The man's gaze moved slowly across the room until it found her. She saw his eyes widen for a brief second, then narrow with something she could not name. Anger, perhaps, or disbelief. He walked forward, each step ringing on the metal floor. No one stopped him yet, though the guards began to close ranks. When he reached the outer edge of the circle, he spoke. His voice was deep, steady, carrying easily through the hall. "What did she do?" he asked. No one answered. The guards stared straight ahead. The council leader did not move. The human's jaw tightened, its eyes moving from one guard to another. He repeated the question, slower this time. Still, there was silence. Avelra could barely lift her head, but she saw him take a step closer. The spears gleamed between them for the first time since her punishment began. She felt a small spark of something strange. It was not hope yet, but it was not despair either. The guards shifted their weapons. The council chamber held its breath. No one knew what the human would do next, not even Avelra, but she saw his eyes again, and in them was something dangerous, not the cold cruelty of the council, but a danger born of defiance. He leaned slightly forward, his voice low but sharp. "I will not ask again," he said, and in that moment, the hall seemed smaller, the air thicker, and the pain in her legs was no longer the only thing she could feel, because she knew something had just changed, something the council had not planned for, something that might end her suffering or destroy her completely. The man stood at the edge of the circle, the cold blue light catching on the scars across his hands. His jacket was worn, stitched in places with mismatched thread. Every detail about him said traveler, someone who had been through more than one dangerous place and survived. But here, in this hall, survival was never promised. Especially for outsiders, he took another step forward, the sound of his boot heel echoing against the metal floor. The crowd's whispers grew louder, earthborn, dangerous. Someone muttered, another voice, older, said, they should not be here. But no one stopped watching him. Avelray could see the human clearly now. His eyes were a sharp gray, like storm clouds about to break. There was a calmness in them, but it was not the kind of calm that meant safety. It was the kind that came before a fight. He looked at her again, his gaze holding for longer this time, and in that stare, she felt something strange, not pity, not curiosity, but a quiet promise that he was not turning away. One of the guards stepped forward, his voice deep through the helmet's speaker. "This is not your matter, human. Leave." The man did not blink. "Not my matter," he said slowly. "Then tell me what her crime is." The guard stayed silent. The human tilted his head, his voice growing sharper. "You dragged her here. You're bleeding her out on your floor. Tell me why." The council leader shifted slightly on his throne. The golden chains across his chest clinked against each other. "The punishment is by law," he said, his tone heavy and slow. "She remains until the sun falls." "Why?" the human asked again. The leader's lips curled in something like a smile. "No reason is owed to you." The man's jaw tightened. Avelra could see the faint lines on his face deepen. He wasn't just angry. He was deciding something. Slowly, he took off his gloves and let them drop to the floor. His voice came out lower now, but it cut through the air like a blade. "If she has no crime, then your law is nothing." The guards raised their weapons a fraction. The crowd shifted nervously in the seats above. Some leaned forward, curious, others leaned back. Sensing what might come, Avelra's breath caught in her throat when the man stepped past the first line of spears. He didn't step onto the sharp floor yet, but he was close enough that the points were only inches from his boots. One guard moved to block him. The man's hand shot out, gripping the guard's weapon barrel and pushing it gently but firmly to the side. The movement was slow, controlled, and that made it more dangerous. "I came here to trade, not to watch torture," he said. "But if this is your justice, then you've made me part of it." The council leader laughed once, a short, dry sound. You are nothing here." The man's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "Maybe not yet," he said, "but I can be." He stepped back, but not in retreat. It was the kind of step someone takes when they're readying themselves. His hands went to the straps of the small pack slung across his shoulder. He didn't pull out a weapon, not yet. Instead, he pulled a narrow strip of cloth. Frayed at the edges, it looked ordinary, but he held it like it meant something. The crowd stared, not understanding. Avelra's eyes narrowed in confusion. 2. Then he knelt, placing the strip of cloth on the ground just before the first spear. He pressed it flat with his palm, his gray eyes never leaving the council leader's face. "What are you doing?" one of the guards asked. The man's voice was even. "I'm marking where I stand," he said, "and once I cross it, nothing will make me go back." The crowd went quiet. The council leader leaned forward slightly, Perhaps in interest. Perhaps. In warning, the human took one more step forward, bringing the edge of his boot against the spear tips. Avelra felt her heart beat faster. She wanted to tell him to stop, to turn away before it was too late, but no words came out. She didn't. No. If she wanted him to leave or to keep going, the air in the hall was heavy now. Every sound seemed louder, the shifting of a guard's armor, the faint crackle of the torches, the slow breath of the man standing at the edge of pain. He looked at her again, and this time his voice was only for her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "Avelra." He gave a single nod. "All right, Avelra," he said. "Let's change the rules." And before anyone could move to stop him, the human stepped fully onto the spear-covered floor. The sound of the human's boots pressing down on the spears cut through the hall like a crack of thunder. Metal tips bent slightly under his weight, but they did not give way. Sharp points pushed into the soles of his boots, some cutting through. The worn leather, the pain was instant, but he didn't flinch. He stood there, steady. His gray eyes locked on the council leader. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No outsider had ever stepped onto the punishment floor before. This space was sacred to the council's control. To see someone walk onto it by choice was unthinkable. Even the guards hesitated, unsure if they should act. The law didn't account for this. Avelra watched in disbelief. The stranger's weight shifted forward, each movement pressing the blades deeper into his boots. She knew the sting of every step he took. She felt her own pain rise just from watching him, yet his expression didn't break. It was as if the pain was nothing compared to the reason he was here. The council leader leaned back in his throne. "You are a fool," he said slowly. "You step into pain without being ordered to." The man's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Pain doesn't scare me." "Ah," he said, "what scares me is silence." In the face of injustice, one guard stepped forward, aiming his weapon at the human's chest, but the leader raised a hand. Stopping him, the room went still again. The leader tilted his head, studying the human like one studies a dangerous animal. "You think our ways are cruel," he said. "They are not yours to judge." The human's jaw tightened. "Cruel is cruel, no matter whose flag it flies," he replied. A murmur rose from the crowd. Some were angered by his defiance. Others were strangely drawn to it. The leader's lips curved in a cold smile. "You speak of judgment," he said, "but our law is older than your world's first city." He gestured toward Avelra without looking at her. "She sits there because our tradition demands it. No crime." The human pressed. "No crime," the leader said. "Only a test of endurance." The man's eyes darkened. "You punish the innocent to prove strength," he said. "That's not strength, that's fear wearing armor." The guards bristled at the insult, but still, the leader didn't order an attack. Instead, he rose slowly from his seat. His robes brushed the floor as he stepped down from the throne. He walked closer, stopping just beyond the edge of the spears. "You speak boldly," he said, "but this is not your place." "It is now," the human said, his voice low. "Because the moment I saw her bleeding on your floor, your law became my problem." The leader's smile faded, replaced by a thin line of displeasure. "You are not bound by our rules." "Human, you can walk away." "I could," the man agreed. "But then I'd have to live, knowing I left her." Here, Avelra felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken for her like this. Not her own people, not strangers passing by, only him. And she didn't even know his name. The leader's voice hardened. "If you take her place, you take her hours, her pain, and her shame." The human's reply came without hesitation. "Then, give me both." The hall erupted in gasps. The crowd's whispers turned into a wave of noise. Even the guards exchanged uncertain glances. The leader looked almost amused. "You think you can endure it?" "I know I can," the man said, "because my pain has a reason." The leader studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a short nod. "Very well," he said. "Sit beside her and let the hours decide your fate, without breaking eye contact." The human stepped forward again. The spears groaned under his weight. He reached to Velra and knelt slowly. The metal tips dug into his knees. Blood began to seep through the fabric of his trousers. But his face didn't show defeat. Instead, he glanced at her. "Name's Rylan," he said quietly. She stared at him for a second. "You're mad?" she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but you won't be alone anymore." The crowd was watching. Some with awe, some with disgust. The leader returned. To his throne from above, the sun's pale light began its slow path toward the windows. The hours ahead would be long. The pain would be sharp, and the law would show no mercy. But for the first time, Velra felt a shift in the air, a change. In the weight of the room, because now she wasn't the only one fighting to survive it. The hall was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that presses against the chest. Making it hard to breathe, Rylan sat beside Velra on the spear-covered floor. Every point bit into his skin. The pain deep and constant, he could feel the warm sting of blood on his legs, but his posture stayed straight, his eyes locked forward. The council leader watched from his throne. A faint, smug curve sat on his lips. He thought time would break the human. Pain had a way of bending even the proudest backs, but Rylan didn't bend. If anything, the longer he sat, the stronger his presence felt in the room. The crowd's whispers had turned into murmurs. They weren't just watching anymore. They were talking about him. Some called him reckless. Others said no outsider should interfere with their law, but a very few, spoke in low voices about courage. Velra kept glancing at him. Her mind was tangled between disbelief and something else she couldn't name. She had seen many endure the spears, but none by choice. And none with such calm defiance after. A long moment, Rylan shifted, not to ease the pain, but to face the council leader fully. "I have a question," he said. His voice carrying across the hall, the leader arched a brow. "This is not a time for questions," he replied. Rylan ignored the warning. "If your law is about strength, why don't you sit here too?" Gasps erupted from the gallery. Velra turned to him in shock. The guards stiffened, their weapons twitching in their hands. The leader's smile disappeared. "You challenge me?" he said, his tone low. "I'm not challenging you," Rylan said. "I'm exposing you." The room went still, every pair of eyes fixed on the human. The leader's gaze hardened. "You dare speak against the council in its own hall?" "I dare speak against cruelty anywhere," Rylan answered. The leader rose from his throne. His golden chains clinked softly as he descended the steps. When he stopped at the edge of the punishment floor, his eyes were cold. "You want to measure strength, human," he said. "Then rise and fight me." The crowd roared at the challenge. It was rare for the leader to fight anyone himself. But Rylan didn't move. He shook his head once. "No," he said. "You fight on this floor, not on smooth ground." The noise in the gallery turned into disbelief. Fighting here meant every move would drive the spears deeper. Every step would cut flesh. Even the strongest warriors avoided it. The leader's jaw clenched. "You think pain will scare me," he said. Rylan's gaze was steady. "No, I think it will reveal you." For a long moment, the leader didn't move. Then he gave a small, humorless laugh. "You are bold, Earthborn," he said. "But you are also bleeding." Rylan smirked faintly. "Pain is the language you speak here," he said. "I'm just speaking it back to you." The leader didn't step forward. Instead, he turned his gaze to the crowd. "See this?" Human, he said, his voice booming. He bleeds for one of you. Yet he is not one of you. He breaks our law by defying it. Ryland's voice cut through the leader's speech like a blade. Your law is already broken, he said. It breaks itself every time it punishes without cause. The tension in the air was so sharp it felt like it could slice skin. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure if they should act. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Something was changing in the room. The control was slipping. The leader could feel it, and so could Ryland. Then Ryland did something no one expected. He reached down, gripped one of the spears beneath him, and pulled. The metal groaned as he wrenched it free from the floor. The guards reacted instantly, raising weapons. But Ryland didn't aim the spear at them. Instead, he drove the point into the ground beside him. This floor belongs to the people, not the council, he said. From this moment, it's not a place for punishment. It's a place for truth. A hush fell over the hall. It wasn't just words anymore. It was a declaration, one that no outsider had ever dared to make. The leader's face darkened. You will regret this, he said. But Ryland didn't look away. You'll regret it more, he replied, beside him. Avelra felt something shift inside her for the first time since she had been taken. She didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt like the tide was turning, and she didn't know what would happen next, but she knew it would not be the council's victory. The spear Ryland had driven into the floor still trembled from the force. The sound of the metal striking the base echoed through the hall like a war drum. The guards remained tense, weapons aimed. Their fingers tight on the triggers, but they hesitated. Something about the human's presence made even the trained soldiers pause. Ryland's breathing was steady, though his knees burned from the spears beneath him. The sharp tips pressed into his skin like they were trying to carve through. Bone-warm blood soaked into the fabric of his trousers, dripping slowly onto the cold floor. The pain was real, constant, and unrelenting, but pain was not new to him. He had carried heavier wounds in darker places. Pain was a language he had learned long ago. And now he was speaking it fluently. Avelra looked at him, her eyes wide. She had seen warriors from her own world break in less than an hour. Yet this stranger had not only stayed, he had dared to speak against the council. She couldn't understand why. No one risked their life for someone they didn't know. No one. Except, maybe, a human. The council leader leaned forward in his throne. Your courage will not save you, he said. This floor takes all who defy it. Ryland met his gaze without fear. Maybe, he said, but I won't be the one on my knees alone. The guards shifted uncomfortably. The crowd's murmurs grew again. It was more than curiosity now. It was interest. A dangerous thing for the council. Interest could turn to doubt, and doubt could turn to rebellion. Ryland moved, his hand to the spear beneath him. His fingers curled around the cold metal. Something strange happened. A faint vibration ran through the weapon. It wasn't the trembling of pain or weight. It was deeper, like the spear was alive. Like it was responding to him. Avelra frowned. Do you feel that? She whispered. Ryland glanced at her. You too? She nodded slowly. It's different, she said, like the floor is. Listening, the leader noticed the exchange. What are you whispering about? He demanded. Ryland didn't answer. Instead, he gripped the spear harder. The vibration grew stronger. Traveling up his arm, he could almost hear something. Not words, exactly. But a hum, a deep, ancient hum. It was as if the metal remembered. Something, without warning, the spears around him began to shift. Not much at first, just a small bend, then another. The sharp points angled away from him and Avelra. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen the floor move like this. It was supposed to be solid, unchanging, unforgiving. Avelra's breath caught. It's protecting us. she said softly. Ryland's jaw tightened. No, he said, it's protecting you. The leader stood abruptly. Stop this. He barked at the guards. They moved forward, but with hesitation. The bending spears were no longer just harmless metal. They looked like they might strike back if provoked. The hum grew louder in Ryland's head. Flashes of images appeared. In his mind, tall spires of a lost city, a battle under a red sky, a promise carved in stone. He didn't understand it all, but he understood enough. This floor was not just a tool of punishment. It was a relic, a weapon of an ancient design. And somehow, it recognized him. Or maybe, it recognized humanity. The leader's voice cracked with rage. This is forbidden. The floor obeys only the council. Ryland's eyes narrowed. Looks like it changed its mind. The spears bent farther, forming a small, clear space around Ryland and Avelra. The metal beneath them was still sharp, still dangerous, but no longer cutting into their skin. The crowd leaned forward. Stunned, for the first time they were seeing the punishment floor refuse to punish. The guards stopped completely now. Their orders meant nothing if the floor itself rebelled. The leader's face was pale with fury. You will be destroyed for this, he growled. Ryland's voice was calm but edged with steel. Then you'd better hurry, because whatever's waking up down here isn't on your side. The hum grew into a pulse. The entire floor began to tremble. Dust drifted from the high windows. The sharp points of the spears rippled like waves. Avelra gripped Ryland's arm, her voice low. What's happening? He looked at her. I think, he said. We just broke your law in the oldest way possible. The leader barked orders. The guards moved to surround them. But the floor buckled suddenly. Metal groaned like a living thing, and then a crack split the ground beneath them. A rush of cold air blasted upward. The gallery erupted in shouts. The spears parted completely, leaving a gap big enough for them to fall through. Avelra's grip tightened. Ryland wrapped an arm around her as the floor gave way. The last thing they saw before dropping into the dark was the council leader's furious face. The last thing they heard was his voice shouting, seal it now. But it was too late. The punishment floor had made its choice, and it had chosen them. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, there was nothing but the rush of cold air against their faces. The sound of the hall above faded quickly, replaced by the deep groan of shifting metal. Then they hit a sloped surface, sliding fast into the unknown. The spears above sealed shut like a mouth closing. Trapping the council out of sight, Ryland gripped Avelra tight, keeping her from rolling into the jagged walls that rushed past them. The slope curved, twisting like the inside of a giant spiral. Strange lights flickered along the walls, pale blue lines that pulsed faintly. They weren't lanterns, they were patterns etched into the metal, glowing like veins of energy when they finally slid to a stop. The air around them was warmer. They lay on a flat platform, smooth and dark. Avelra's chest heaved as she caught her breath. What is this place? She whispered. Ryland stood, scanning their surroundings. I think, he said, we're under the punishment floor. The space was vast. Massive pillars of black steel rose into the darkness above, disappearing into shadow between them. Hundreds of spear-like rods hung suspended in the air, swaying slightly as if moved by some invisible current. The hum Ryland had felt earlier was stronger here. It vibrated through his bones, deep and rhythmic. Like a heartbeat, Avelra stood slowly, her eyes wide. This isn't part of the council's records, she said. They've never spoken of anything under the floor. Of course not, Ryland replied. Because if the people knew what was here, they'd start asking the wrong questions. He walked toward one of the hanging rods. As he reached out, it shifted away from his hand, almost like it was alive. Then it drifted back, touching his palm gently when it did. A surge of energy shot up his arm. Not pain, but a rush of images. He saw flashes of a war fought centuries ago, humans and aliens side by side against a common enemy. He saw the floor being built, not for punishment, but for protection. Avelra noticed his distant stare. "What are you seeing?" Rylan blinked, letting go of the rod. "They built that floor as a shield," he said. "It wasn't meant to hurt people. It was meant to keep something else locked away." Her eyes widened. "Locked away? Like what?" Rylan shook his head. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, the Council's been hiding it." The hum deepened suddenly. The ground beneath them vibrated. From the shadows between the pillars, shapes began to emerge. They weren't people. They were constructs. Tall, thin frames made of black metal, their movements precise and deliberate. Their heads were smooth, featureless domes. Their arms ended in long, claw-like fingers. Avelra stepped back, her voice tense. "Guardians," she said. "They're the old machines from before our cities." Rylan's hand went to the small blade at his belt. The machines moved slowly, circling them, but instead of attacking, they stopped a few paces away. One of them tilted its head, and a voice that wasn't a voice echoed in their minds. "You are not the Council." Rylan's jaw tightened. "No," he said aloud, "you carry the old signal." The voice continued. "You are marked human." Avelra's gaze darted between Rylan and the constructs. "They know you," she said. Rylan frowned. "Not me," he said. "My species." The constructs' heads turned toward Avelra. "She is injured," the voice said. "This is not her place." Rylan stepped forward. "Then take us where we need to." B. The constructs turned in unison and began to move deeper into the chamber. Rylan helped Avelra follow, their footsteps echoing against the smooth metal floor. They passed massive walls covered in glowing lines. The patterns seemed to shift when Rylan got closer. It was as if the place itself was reacting to his presence. Finally, they reached a wide circular platform in the center of the chamber. In the middle stood a column of light, rising from the floor to the unseen ceiling above. The hum was loudest here, almost like it was alive. The constructs stopped. "This is the core," the voice said. "It remembers." Rylan stepped closer to the light. The glow shifted from cold blue to warm gold. He could feel it, the same recognition. He felt from the spears. Avelra watched, her voice soft. "It's like it's welcoming you." Rylan looked over his shoulder at her. "This isn't a punishment floor," he said. "It's the entrance to something much bigger, above them." The distant sound of the Council's forces echoed down the shaft. They were coming. The construct's voice entered their minds again. If the Council reaches the core, they will claim it. It must choose now. Rylan placed his hand into the column of light. The chamber went silent for a heartbeat. Then the entire underground roared to life. The glowing lines on the walls blazed. The hum became a deep, resonant tone, and the constructs dropped to one knee, facing him. Avelra's voice was almost a whisper. "What did you do?" Rylan's expression was unreadable. "I think," he said. "I just became the thing they were afraid of." The golden light wrapped around Rylan's arm like liquid fire. It didn't burn, but it pulsed with a steady rhythm, matching his heartbeat. Avelra stepped back. Shielding her eyes from the brightness, the constructs stood motionless. There. Heads bowed toward him from above. The muffled sound of heavy boots and metal doors crashing open echoed down the shaft. The Council's forces were getting closer. Rylan turned to the nearest construct. "Is there another way out?" he asked. The voice entered both their minds. "There are tunnels the Council has forgotten. We will guide you, but you carry the key now." He glanced at Avelra. Her legs were still weak from hours on the spears. "You can walk." She nodded, though the pain in her eyes said otherwise. "I can if you help." The constructs moved in a perfect line, leading them toward a massive archway at the far end of the chamber. The glowing lines on the walls brightened as they passed, almost urging them forward. Behind them, the golden light of the core dimmed slightly, as if conserving its strength for whatever came next. The tunnel beyond the arch was vast and silent. Old machinery lined the walls, rusted gears, shattered panels, and broken glass. Some of the machines still glowed faintly, their lights flickering like dying stars. The hum from the core faded, replaced by the faint rush of air somewhere far ahead. As they moved deeper, Avelra broke the silence. "You could have left me there," she said softly. "Why didn't you?" Ryland didn't look at her, because where I come from, you don't watch someone suffer if you can stop it. "That's not how it works here," she said. "Then maybe it's time it did." He replied. The constructs suddenly stopped, their heads tilting toward the shadows ahead. From the darkness, figures stepped into the faint light. Council soldiers armored and armed, blocking the path. Their leader raised a weapon. "Give us the human and the girl," he ordered, "or you won't leave this tunnel alive." Rylan stepped forward. "You've already tried to kill me once today," he said. "You want a second chance?" The soldiers tightened their formation. The leader's voice hardened. "You're standing in a place you shouldn't even know exists." Before Rylan could answer, the constructs moved. They didn't rush or stumble. They advanced in perfect, fluid coordination, their clawed hands extended, their black frames towering over the soldiers. The soldiers opened fire, but the shots bounced harmlessly off the construct's armor. The clash of metal rang through the tunnel. Rylan pulled Avelra behind the cover of a broken machine. The fight was short. The constructs moved with precision, dismantling weapons and disabling the soldiers in seconds. When it was over, the path ahead was clear. The constructs didn't speak, but one gestured toward the light now visible at the far end of the tunnel. They moved quickly. The air grew fresher. The sound of the outside world returned, the distant rush of wind, the calls of birds, and then they stepped out onto a cliff overlooking a wide valley. The sky was deep orange with the setting sun. Avelra stood still, staring at the open space. After hours in the cold, cruel hall, the sight felt unreal. Rylan glanced at her. "You're free now," he said. She looked at him. "And what about you?" "I'm not done yet," he replied. The constructs stopped at the cliff's edge. "The core will wait for you," the voice said, "but the council will not stop hunting you." Rylan gave a faint, humorless smile. "Let them try," Avelra's voice. It was quiet. "They'll call you a criminal. They can call me whatever they want," Rylan said. "But they'll remember what happened today." She stepped closer. "Why?" she asked again. "Why risk your life for someone you don't know?" Ryland finally met her gaze. "Because where I come from," he said, "we don't measure strength by how long someone can suffer. We measure it by how far we'll go to end that suffering." The sun slipped lower, bathing the valley. In golden light, far behind them, the council city lay hidden in the shadows. But the story of what happened in the hall would not stay buried. Whispers would spread of a human who stepped onto the spears of a law that bent for the first time in centuries, and of a floor that chose its own side. Rylan turned from the cliff, the constructs silently falling in behind him. Avelra followed, her steps still unsteady, but her spirit unbroken. The valley stretched ahead like a promise, the first step into something bigger than either of them had expected. As they walked into the fading light, Rylan's voice was steady on earth. He said, "We don't watch injustice, we end it."